I'm Fiona Harrison, demonstrator and teacher of floral design. So today I'm going to show you how to make a structure that is particularly suitable for one of our favourite spring flowers, the tulip. But before that, just to get the mechanics sorted out first, you want to take half a block of floral foam, chamfer it at the edges and soak it, and then put it into one of these Oasis plastic, it's a round square dish, and I've given the measurements for that on the worksheet. So I've strapped that in and then put it onto a platter. This is the sort of thing that would be that would work. This type of platter. I have got some of these if anybody needs them. But failing that, I've got a very nice wooden one here, which I'm going to use because it's going to be in keeping with the design. So I'm going to put this to one side for a moment, and we're going to make the structure. So the first thing you want to do is you want to cut 8 lengths of garden twine, and then take 4 of them together because we're going to make this item twice. So take 4 of your cut lengths of 4 foot, 120 centimetres of garden twine. So I've got 4 in my hand, and then I'm going to take my roll of real wire and I'm going to bind it around all 4 strands of twine. Bind it around a couple of times and then just very loosely take it all the way down the garden twine, just twisting it as you go. I'm going to just let that go. I think it might be slightly easier to do. Just twisting it slightly so that it's wrapping itself around the twine very loosely. And then when you get to the other end, don't worry if it hasn't attached itself terribly well. Wrap it again to secure it. And this is where the fun bit starts. You're probably wondering what on earth you're going to do with the hay that I've given you. So it's slightly messy. What you want to do is take some of the hay, a wodge of hay, and we're going to try and keep the twine in the centre of your wodge of hay, and then wrap the wire, which you kept attached, around the hay. It's slightly tricky keeping the string in the centre, but with a little bit of tweaking you should manage to do that. If it pops out the side, don't worry about it too much, just poke it back in. And then you want to go all the way down the whole length of the 4 foot of twine. Maybe a little bit thicker than I have it there. I'll show you a finished one in a minute. But you literally wrap the wire all the way round the twine, right down to the very bottom. And then when you've done that, let's say we've done that, that's the first step. So here's one that I prepared earlier. That is slightly thicker, I would have thought. So a couple of thumb thicknesses, or maybe even 3 thumb thicknesses. So I've wrapped this all the way down, and then at one end, I should have a loose end. Let me just find the loose end. Yeah, here we go. So I've wrapped the wire all the way down to the other end, and then what you want to do is take the wire back again. So let's just say this is the whole thing done, and the wire is attached there. Let me just cut that for a second. Just falling in love with itself, it's all tangled up. Let me just untangle this bit. And I'll attach it back onto the end. Okay, so you've got your reel of wire at the far end of the 4 foot. So this time you want to just crisscross it back the other way. I'm doing this slightly awkwardly because you can probably see I've got a splint on my finger. It's broken, which makes it a little bit awkward. I'm sure you'll find this a lot easier than I will. So literally, I'm just wrapping the wire round. So you've gone down one length of it, and you're going back up the length of it again. And that's to make more wire secure the hay with more wire, so that we can manipulate it. Right, I'm going to run out of wire here because I've cut it just to save a little bit of time. But what you're going to do is go right down to the far end again. And then this time, when you've gone right down to the far end, you can cut the wire because we don't need the wire anymore. And when you're cutting the wire, either use a pair of wire cutters or use the very V point of the scissors so as not to blunt your scissors. So you're going to cut it like that. And then you make another one exactly like this. So we want a 4-foot length of, you'll see that you can manipulate this now. You can actually twist it around and manipulate it because it's got wire through the middle of it, and it's got 2 coils of wire, one going down the length and then coming back. So there's quite a lot of wire holding it together now. And the other thing that you might like to do at this stage is, if there's a lot of hay poking out, you can trim bits off just to neaten it up a little bit. You can do that later as well if you want to, but if there's any bits that are obvious, you might like to trim them down. Okay, now I'm just going to clear this out of the way so that I'm not working in a mess. This is the sort of technique, by the way, it's a mossing technique. Very often you would make a garland. These are like 2 garlands. You'd make those with moss and wire, or you could use straw and wire. The only reason I'm using hay is that I don't have any straw here for the horses that we keep here, and we do have hay. But if you were going out to buy it, I would buy straw because it's actually quite a lot cheaper than hay. So the next thing we do is we take one of our coils, one of our garlands I should say, and make it into a coil. So you can see with this one, if one end is fatter than the other, so I've got a fat end here and a thin end, I would make the fat end sit at the bottom and the thin end at the top. And what you want to do is you want to just coil it round like so. Yeah, so that we've made a coil. Let me just see how many times I can coil that round. I think I can go, yeah, I think I can do that. Okay, so we've got the fat end here, and then we've got one coil, and then we've got another coil. And the way to work this out is try to have the 2 ends above each other. So I've got one end here where my thumb is, and I've got the other coil here, and they're directly above each other. And we now need to secure our coils, and we do that with bamboo sticks. So I've got quite a tall bamboo stick here, and I'm going to secure the pointed end down through the second coil and through the end of the coil. Like so. And then the one at the top, I'm going to use a shorter bamboo to secure the top of the coil to the next row down. So I've secured both ends of the coil. Right, now that holds it in position to allow you to then take 2 more bamboo sticks. And what you want to do with those is secure the rest of it. So I'm going to secure it here, the sides, shall we say. That keeps that secure. And then to hold the coil secure, I obviously need one here as well. So I'm going to put one in there. And secure it with the middle coil. Okay, so far I've used 4 bamboo kebab sticks to secure my coil. Now the other one's dropped on the floor, let me just get that. Then we want to take a nice long one, number 5, and making it secure diagonally. So I'm going to go in at the top and then go diagonally across to the coil, the next coil down. So now I've got a good coil structure. Okay, so the next thing to do is to take my mechanics back. And what we want to do now is we want to attach the coil to the mechanics. And this is why I've used quite a long one at the beginning, because I can pull this down and attach it to my Oasis. And I'm using one of the side bamboos on the second piece of Oasis. Sorry, the second placement going into the Oasis. And then we want to just straighten it up, just make sure that you're happy with the general shape. So we want to have a circle there, and a circle there. So that's our first piece of the structure. And for the second piece of the structure, you want to take your second garland and then use this to make a nice big coil at the bottom. I'll just find a couple more bamboo sticks, they seem to have vanished. And that's very annoying. Oh, they're here. I put them out to make it easy for me and then lost them. So I'm going to take, I think, probably some short ones that I've cut down. And then it would make sense to put the end of it close to where you finish this one. Perhaps just overlapping them slightly. Let's try that. And then I'm going to use the pointed end again and go through both of the garlands into the Oasis. That helps to secure it. And then this one can curl right around and use it to help disguise your container. So it can come right round the dish. Well, that's popped out. Let's just move it back round. That's it. So that's, I'm leaving this one loose actually. I think that's going to come down over the bottom. I think I'm happy with that. So I'm using the second garland to help disguise the dish. And if you had a slightly larger plate, you might find that this is sitting on the plate, whereas mine is just below it, but I'm not unhappy with that. I think that's okay. Okay, so we've got our structure made. And the next thing to do is to green up. But before doing that, I think it's just worth noting that the garland, the use of the two garlands in the coiled form is creating quite a lot of movement and rhythm in this design. So the structure is giving us some rhythm. And the fact that you've put the structure onto a round dish as opposed to, you know, a square one, for example, is also going to continue that rhythm and harmonise the structure with the dish, which is always a good thing if you can try to think of a way of harmonising your design with your container. And both of them being rounded continues that curved shape. Okay, right, so the next thing to do is to add some foliage. And I've got a selection here. I've got some Lonicera nitida Baggerman's Gold, and I quite like the attitude of this plant material because parts of it are quite dense, and I want to use some quite dense bits of material at the bottom to help to disguise my foam. It's also a great colour with spring flowers, so I'm going to use some quite bushy pieces quite low down in the design. It's also got this sort of quite spiky effect to it, which I rather like. That one's a bit sparse, we'll get some more. So it doesn't really matter what sort of foliage you use for this design. Any garden foliage will help just create a nice spring, exuberant spring look. It doesn't really matter how many types of foliage either. You know, you might like to use a couple. I think that's all I need to do here. So I'm using them low down first of all. I'll keep that bit for something else a bit higher up. And then I probably want some longer pieces of foliage higher up in the design. Let's just see how tall this is. Perhaps one there in the centre. Now this design, I've got to admit, was actually shown to me some years ago by Lee Beryl, who is a very talented designer and teacher from, now where is he from? Nottingham, I think. No, not Nottingham, no, not that far away. Perhaps it's not, oh, Northampton, closer to Northampton if I remember rightly. And he has been teaching for many, many years. And I'm sure some of you will have seen him demonstrate in the past. So I have another material here, just for a little bit of variation. I've got some conifer as well. So I'm going to use that just to have a bit of contrast to the Lonicera. When we sometimes think of conifer as a winter plant material, but it can just a little of it can be quite attractive in spring and summer as well. Just creating a little bit of interest in there. And it's a contrast in form. You could also use some larger leaves. If you wanted to use larger leaves at the bottom, I think that would also work in this design. Okay, that's enough for now. I can always add a bit more later. So, time to put the flowers in. Now, this structure I think is particularly suited to tulips because we all know that part of the charm of tulips is that eventually, or maybe even quite quickly, they will grow towards the light. So in whatever design or whatever vase you put them into, they're always going to bend in that charming way. But it can also be a little bit annoying if you find that they're bending away from where you want them to be. So this structure is, I think, particularly suited to showing tulips off because you've got the, I'll leave it that high just at the moment, I'll have one high. You've got the support of the structure, which I think is jolly helpful when you're working with tulips. Now tulips have a soft stem, so you do need to be quite careful when you're inserting them into the design. Make sure that you're holding them right now down near the bottom of the, that's still a bit tall, the bottom of the stem, because if you hold them up and try and put them in, you're likely to break the tulip. So I'm going to just insert those by having my finger really down quite close. It's still a bit too long, I think. And there are some really gorgeous tulips in the shops and in the florists at the moment. I'm just sorry that I can't get to the Kirkenhof gardens this year because in every other year I've been able to go there and look at the beautiful tulips in the Kirkenhof. They have 10 million blooms planted in their gardens at this time of the year, and 7 million of those are tulips. So it's a great shame not to be there as usual. And we also in this house in the garden here we grow our own tulips. My husband's very keen on them, so we usually have a very nice selection. There's not many coming out yet, not ones that I'm allowed to pick anyway, because the ones that are available are in parts of the garden that I'm not allowed to pick them in. But I know in the cutting garden we do have some that will come out and I'll be able to use later on. So lower down in the design, I'm actually keeping them a bit shorter. Let's try and get that one in there. That's perfect. But I do think this is a great design for tulips. For the reasons I've mentioned, you've got the support of that structure. One or two of mine are already cut a bit short because I've used them in another design, so I'm just going to use those much lower down. For this particular one that I have, this tulip, I don't know the name of it, but it's rather pretty because it's pink. It's two shades of pink, and then it's got this white around the edge. And when you look straight into it, the centre of it is white, and it's got a slightly bluish tinge, and then the stamens are slightly purple almost. So it's a very attractive one. And you do get some absolute beauties. that one. That's the lot, right. So now I have got some space left where I will fill in a little bit, and I'll just check that everything is balancing. I really like this guy to be around the centre, so I'll wrap him around the foliage. And where I see I've got space, I'll put in some more of the Lonicera. Yeah, it's a great material because you can use the bushy parts to cover your foliage, cover your oasis, and you can use the long pieces more dramatically to give you a little bit of height. And it also has this quite wild look to it. It's going off in different directions, and that's another reason that I think it works quite well with tulips, because they do the same thing. They have a mind of their own. They go off in different directions too, and I think this slightly wild looking material suits the attitude of the tulips really quite well. I've got some pieces of conifer here too. So this design is actually quite rustic because we're using an agricultural material almost with the hay or straw. It really is quite rustic, quite countrified, and I think that's one of the reasons it works with my my base, which is wooden. I think that works really well. Just finishing off with some final pieces of conifer where I can see some foam showing through. And I've made this as an all-round design, so it would actually look great in the middle of a round table. Following that theme of roundness through, it would look great on a round table. But having said that, I'm probably also thinking I'll put it on my hall table, which isn't round, but you know, it'd look equally at home there. So I'm just checking. I quite like this, the fact that it's curving over. And the curling twine, the curling coil in the centre is also echoing the attitude of the tulips. So the Lonicera is going off in different directions, the tulips are doing their own thing, and the coil is circling round from, you know, wide at the bottom, graduating up to narrow at the top, which is giving this design, I think, a lot of movement. So I hope you like that as a spring design, and I'll look forward to seeing your version. If you'd like to send me a photograph of your finished design, that would be great. Thank you very much.